Hello and welcome to today's lesson in rudiment and theory. We have come to the end of the first chapter, which talked about the elements of rhythm. And then the chapter also served as a detailed survey to those elements of music that represents time and how it is symbolized. We said that music is not a temporary fixed entity, but it exists in its own time, and it's being calculated by the progression of rhythm and meter across a compositionally predetermined time span. An intimate and close understanding of rhythm and its attributes is the first essential skill any musician must acquire. From performance through analysis, the aspects of rhythmic organization permeate the entire range of all skill sets that serves as the basis for becoming a competent, literate, and a functional musician. Now, in this chapter, we are going to discuss about the element of pitch and its attributes, and we'll also talk about how these skill sets are in tandem with rhythm, and will prepare the students for exploring first the grammar, then the syntax of the musical language. So let's quickly go to what we are to do to the elements of the pitch. We shall explore how tone is represented in music. And in early music, sound was not precisely notated. Rather, a system of mnemonic symbols called the mnemos gave only an approximate indication of where tones sounded in relation to one another in terms of relative highness or lowness. And many notation traditions and practice evolved in the early Western music, and there was no uniform practice as to how sound in music was notated. So, musicologists normally credit Guido di Arezzo, who was an Italian music theorist of the medieval era, for an all-important development. And among his many pedagogical contributions, Guido adapted and synthesized elements of numerous notational practices in order to formulate a standardized notational system. So sometimes you can hear the Guido or the Guidonian hand or the Guidonian staff, of which we'll look at it in a pitch notation. And we can also look at the significance of his contribution and his pedagogical tools that form the basis of how music notation evolved into a recognized standard notation. That is something brief, something introductory about what we are coming to do. Let's quickly go to what we are coming to do for today. Elements of pitch. And we are going to look at the pitch clusters, or the pitch class, and then the pitch. But before that, let's look at our learning goals for today. We have to understand how or understand and define pitch and then pitch classes. We also have to understand the staves and the ground staff We also have to understand the clefs and their uses, and lastly we have to understand ledger lines and their uses as well. Now let's try and define the following. Pitch. When we talk of pitch, what does it mean? Pitch. A pitch is defined as the relative highness or lowness of sound, and this is a general definition. In music, we speak of pitch as a specific tone that is specifically placed and notated. So we can say that the relative highness or lowness of a sound is a pitch, and individual pitches are specifically located and notated on the staff. So we notate pitch on the staff, and as we move on, we are going to look at what is meant by the staff. Now let's look at the second one, that is the pitch class. The pitch class in recent term describes a generalized or generic relationship of pitches that sound essentially identical but are separated by a sense of highness or lowness. And pitch class also refers to the tones that share the same pitch space, that is, they sound identical but are spelled differently. So when we are talking of a pitch class, we will say that pitch classes are all those pitches which share the same letter name or share the same pitch space, but they have different spellings. Let's move on to the next, the staff. We have already mentioned the man behind the staff or the origin of the staff, but since early notation was not specific as to the exact placement of pitch, a system of parallel horizontal lines came into use in order to show the exact placement. Interestingly, earlier systems of notation employing parallel lines had been in use, and many used only the lines themselves to locate pitch, not the spaces between. So the staff originated as a system of 11 parallel lines that encompasses the theoretical span of available pitches, which was the range of the male voice from bass to the male soprano. And you could see that in St. Paul's epistles to the Corinthians, he delivers an injunction to let your woman keep silent in the church, and this became the rationale for the exclusion of women from participation in the early church. But in practice, or in normal practice, this complete system was limited to 4 or 5 parallel lines encompassing the range of a given chant, melody, or a voice part. So the staff has been divided from the Gideonian chants, but let's look at how the Gideonian chants or the Gideonian staff was like, and then we can really understand what brought about the lines and space. Now this is how the Gideonian chants looked like. So there were 11 in all, And then on the 11, the down part okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So this is how it was. This is how Gideon the Arezu brought up. Pitches were assigned specific names. These were pitches which were assigned specific names, and the lowest pitch, which was called the gamma, this lowest pitch, which was called the gamma, extended to the highest pitch, called the ut. So this was the gamma, and then this was the ut. So in normal contractions, the term gamut had entered the language to mean a complete range or scope. Okay, so this was the gamma, and then this was the ut, and gamut was a musical language, or a language which meant a complete range or scope. The 11-line system actually is very cumbersome, because in the early music, specific lines were colored with different dyes, and each line locating a specific pitch. So we colored some of the lines to indicate certain pitches, but you could see that these particular ones were named, these particular ones were named, these particular ones were also named. So all other pitches were held in relation to these, but in time the 11 lines were separated into 2, and it became 2 5 lines. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was separated from this one, and this is what is in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was also separated, and it became 2 different or 2 separate 5-line staves, and the remaining line between the 2 staves was not drawn, but was understood as being shared by each of the staff. So the middle line, which is the C in quote, was not drawn, but it was understood. But we philosophers also said specific symbols came into use, replacing the colored lines. So instead of them to use colors to differentiate between the lines, they were now using specific symbols, and that is where the clef came into being. So the clef served the same purpose as the colored lines, and locating exact pitches around which all other pitches were calculated, and these clefs were the representation of general voice ranges and their names to reflect this. Okay, and we label pitch class by the use of letter names. So the first 7 letters of the alphabet, or the first 7 letters of the English alphabet, are what is used to name the lines there, or the lines in the space. And then the treble clef, okay, they now use symbols. So the treble clef, normally indicating a higher voice, was from the line here upwards. So you see that the second line was taken to be the treble clef because it had the high voice, and from this line down to the F was the low voice, which was also termed as the bass clef. And you could see that from these 2 fixed points, all other pitches were calculated and placed on the 5 lines staff, and it clearly shows in the second. So when it was divided into 2, you could get this clef, that's the treble clef, and then the bass clef, and they were now divided into 5 lines: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They were divided into 5, and we've already said that they are the first 7 letters of the English alphabet. So if from Gideonian stuff we were able to identify that the second line of the higher voice is G, then definitely it will be easy for us to name the stuff. So you could see that the first line of the treble clef is E, the second line will be G, the third line is B, the fourth line is D, and the fifth line is F. And in the spaces, it became very known that if we have been able to identify, or if we've been able to name the lines, then definitely it should be easy for us to also name the space. So if the first line is E, and if we are following the English alphabet rule, then it means that the next one that comes after E is what? F, and that was in a space. So we had G in the second line, and what comes after G is what? The recycling, or the start of the cycle, which is A. Then if this is B, this will be C. If this is D, then this will be E. So in the space 2, we got F, A, C, and then E. So we had E, G, B, D, and F. Then we have in the space F, A, C, and E. When you go to the bass clef, if the fourth line is F, following the English alphabet rule, then it means we can simply name the lines. So you could see that this is G, B, D, F, and A. And when it comes to the space, we have A, C, E, and then what? G. So these were the naming systems that was used after the separation from the Gideonian chant. And these two staves are combined into a system called the grand staff. In notation, we call complete lines of music a system, and this reflects its origins from the Gideonian staff. Okay, 2 5-line staves slightly separated together, and then the remaining invisible middle line shared by both. So we could now say that the grand staff now yields the potential for locating and notating all pitches from the lowest to the highest. So we can have the grand staff here, and we can see that this is what we call the invisible middle line, and that is what is dividing the two staff or two staves into equal parts. So we can see that this is C, this is E, G, B, D, F, and then A, and here we have D, F, A, C, E, and G. And if you come to the bass clef, we have E as the starting ledger line, we have G, B, D, F, A, and C. Then on the spaces we have F, A, C, E, G, and then D. So I wrote a very short note which says that you should observe that the pitch C, that's the middle C, is one line below the treble clef and one line just above the bass clef, and it should tell you that it is the remaining vestige of the 11th line from the Gideonian staff, the line which was invisible, the middle line which was very invisible. So we should know that this one was from the Gideonian staff. Out of the Gideonian staff came the grand staff, and the grand staff pitches are listed just outside the boundaries of each clef on the grand staff. And since the two staves, that is the treble and the bass, are separated from one another in the grand staff, it is very necessary to use symbols to extend each beyond its 5 lines. Okay, and this one is going to introduce us to our next subheading, which is the ledger lines. And so when we talk of a ledger line, they are short horizontal dashes used to extend the range of the staff, either above or below, and they serve as a truncated staff lines. They might occur just above or below a note head, or they may bisect a note head. So when we talk of a ledger line, they are small horizontal dashes above, below, or through a note head used to extend the range of the staff. So we can, just as the keyboard is having about 66 keys or more, the staff is just about 5 lines and 4 spaces, and the ledger line is used to extend the range of the staff to add more pitches, okay, to the staff. So let's look at some of the ledger lines we have. You can have C as a ledger line, which is just below the treble clef, and this one is just above the treble clef. The A is just above the treble clef. The B is also above the treble clef, but is on a space just above the first ledger line. The C is above the treble clef, but is on 2 ledger lines. The D is above the treble clef, but is also found in a space above the 2 ledger lines. So this one is also in a ledger space. Now these ones are found below the treble clef. You can see the C here. The B is a space below the middle C. The A, 2 lines, 2 ledger lines. The G in a space, then the F in 3 ledger lines. Now when it comes to the bass clef, the C is above the bass clef, the D above the bass clef in a space, the E 2 ledger lines above the bass clef, the F the space above the 2 ledger lines, and then the G 3 ledger lines above the bass clef. The same goes to these ones below the bass clef. We have E just below 1 ledger line below the bass clef, D a space below the bass clef, C, then we have B. C is just 2 ledger lines below the bass clef, B is a space below the bass clef or a space below the 2 ledger lines, and A is a space below the bass clef which has 3 ledger lines. Now let's try the following. The student should exercise particular care when drawing ledger lines, because a common mistake of initiating music students is placing the ledger lines on the wrong side of the note head. So when you are drawing, you should be very careful and then observe some of the properties, that the stems extend up or down from the note head to the next pitch class of the same name. This practice for notating system length has its early origins as a pitch designation, not as a durational value. Okay, and then you should also take note that stems are drawn down from note heads on the middle line from the staff, and above, below the middle line, stems are drawn up. Okay, so if we have a note here, a note head here, the line or the stem can either go up or down. But when the note head is down, you see how it has been drawn. the stem goes up, the stem goes up. But when it is above the third line, the stem comes down. Okay, so you see how it is being drawn. And you should also know that if the stem is up, the stem is always on the right side of the note head. If the stem is up, the stem is on the right side, not on the left. Okay, not on the left. And then the stem is on the left side of the note head when the stem is down. So you see that when the stem is down, the stem is on the left side. So look at the difference between the two. When it is up, it's on the right. When it is down, it is on the left. So let's try and answer the following questions. I hope by now you have written down your answers in your jotters or in your notebooks. Now let's move on to placement of pitches on the staff. When we are using these notational devices, exact pitch placements can be shown, but we should know that the pitch that is one ledger line above the bass clef is identical to the pitch that is one ledger line below the treble clef. They are all middle C. So this shared connective pitch is reminiscent of the middle line from the Gideon staff, and it serves to connect the two staffs. That's why I initially said you divide the staff into two equal parts. So we should be very mindful of that. Now let's observe the grand staff. Note that the pitches of the same letter name occur throughout the system, and individual tones are specifically recognized as such. So pitches having the same letter name but separated by range are recognized as pitch classes. Therefore, the notes one ledger line below the treble staff is designated as the pitch C or middle C, but all notes so labeled constitute the pitch class C. So you could see that all these ones are pitch classes, but this one is C. So let's look at the treble clef. This is C, this is D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C. So this is ascending order, both from the treble clef and then the bass clef, and this is the descending order: C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. So you could see from the ledger lines coming down to the middle C. You should also observe that ledger lines extend notes below treble clef may be written in bass clef. So similarly, ledger lines extending notes above bass clef may be written in treble clef. But at times, it is more appropriate to write pitches using ledger lines rather than switching to another staff and clef. And you should be very careful and very cautious when writing or labeling pitches that cross over between staves. Okay, so let's try and answer this. Let's try and write the notes names of the following. We could identify this one and identify this. We could also identify this and identify this and identify this, identify this, identify this, identify this, identify this, and that. So you should be able to answer these questions with ease from what we have done. And by now, I know you've written your answers in your notes book. Overview. By now, you should be able to understand the following: that pitch is relatively the highness or lowness of a sound, and pitch class is a generic designation referring to tones sounding the same but are separated by relatively high or the lowness of a sound. You should be able to understand that the staff is a 5-line system used to locate pitches, and the grand staff is a system of 2 5-line staves spanning the complete usable range of pitches with the use of ledger lines. You should also be able to understand that CLEFS are specialized symbols denoting specific pitches on a staff. All other pitches are located in relation to these. And then the last one is you should be able to understand that ledger lines are horizontal dashes that are used to extend the range of a given staff just above or below its 5-line boundaries. Thank you very much for joining me in this lesson, and I hope to see you next time in our next lesson where we'll be talking about accidentals. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to activate the bell and follow, and leave your comments in the comments box. Thank you and have a nice day. See you.